So this is a piece on the front page of the Financial Times today, Monday, the 12th of October 2020. Looming tax bills spur Citibanks to recall staff logging on at holiday villas. This is mainly to do with the tax bills, etc. Now, that actually exposes the contradiction. Because if they can be called back, recalled, and made to return to the UK for whatever reason, tax liabilities, then that shows that there is no need for any safety measures to prevent infection by the virus, doesn't it? That is a summary of the actual contradiction. And that sums up the whole mess that Boris Johnson embodies and his cabal embody. The details are not published in the Financial Times piece. It just says that this is based on, for example, Credit Suisse, the bank taking similar action, and it cites as sources familiar with the behavior or the decision of the particular bank. So it doesn't actually give any details, any facts or any evidence, which is what the diagnosis coming to this program or from this program about Fleet Street is, that they don't give the details, they don't give the evidence, they don't give the facts. So where do people find the facts? For this campaign, the Kudilar campaign, which is a campaign started in December 2003, defending the community in the East End of London against the agenda fronted by the Crossrail plot to dig hole in Brick Lane and do other damage to the East End of London. We have encountered, as we have been continuing to encounter and experience, evidence as integral part of the action that we take every day in defense of the community in the East End of London, and from the East End of London uphold the same universal values of accountability, transparency, ethics, morality, universality, and objectivity. This may sound as a mouthful, but it is absolutely justified, because everywhere else there is no even mention of one of these values. And this is the reason why we are running this program, which is addressing all the major issues of the world as it is addressing all the major reasons behind the problems in the UK. And our context remains very much based entirely on the evidence and the facts and the reality, rather than on any partisan affiliation of any kind whatsoever. Which takes us back to discussing, in brief, the situation in Bangladesh about the gang rape of the woman in Silot in the MC College on the 25th of September 2020. The more people get to know about what happened, the more confirmed it becomes that the gang rape was not an accident, that it was part of the impunity given to certain members of certain political kind of affiliations or affiliates. Now that has to change, that has to disappear. And that has to disappear forever from Bangladesh. No crime must be allowed as part of a political arrangement. And more importantly, although every crime is as important as the next crime, major crime, most importantly, no sexual violence, rape, or other sexual violence must be exonerated or excused for whatever reason. There must not be. And so therefore, rapists must not live in Bangladesh, and there must be no rape in Bangladesh. That is the simplest form of the demand that exists to solve the problem. And this we extend to India as well, as to Pakistan. But India, next to Bangladesh, but also India has got one of the world's largest numbers of rapes taking place. And India has got rapes of women that are Muslim, girls that are Muslim. So that is the additional aggravation and violation. And the United Nations has not mentioned India in any significant way about this violation of the United Nations founding charters and the existing arrangements that the United Nations operates about protecting women and victims of rape and sexual crimes. They don't go far enough. They don't go anywhere near what they should be doing. And the United Nations must stop pussyfooting, playing games of publicity and propaganda and peddling images of the current Secretary General, and get down to the business of holding the countries to account, naming and shaming the countries, and supporting this call that no sexual violence must be allowed. Sexual crimes must be allowed in any country. And in this context, no sexual violence and crimes must be tolerated in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, so other countries as well. And in the context of the kind of promotion in Fleet Street today of the image of Harry and Meghan talking remotely with Malala Yousafzai, the violence of rape and sexual violence against girls and against other victims as well, must be put in context about the violence done to girls, about their right to education. Right to education is absolutely vital, but right to sanctity of life and sanctity of body and sanctity against violence by rape and rapists and sexual attacks, more important, absolutely more important. Not saying that violence on education should be in any way treated any less importantly and significantly, severely. But sexual violence against women and girls and against men as well by other men must be treated as the ultimate crime. So no rapist, no sexually violating person should be allowed to live in Bangladesh or in India or in Pakistan. And we are going to continue monitoring the situation in Bangladesh, and we suspect that there may be attempts to exonerate some of the rapists and sexual attackers and violators. If that happens, then whoever will be behind these exoneration attempts will pay the price sooner or later in more permanent ways than they think they can get away with. Because the gang rape of the person in Sylhet on 25th of September, for a long number of years, that kind of outrage that has been following this particular incident, The outrage has been overdue. And this is the outrage that nobody in Bangladesh must dismiss or try to undermine or try to kind of get over. The outrage must prevail and be respected and recognized and seen as the most positive thing that the country and the population can contribute to the future of society and humanity in this country, Bangladesh. So, no rape in Bangladesh, no sexual violence in Bangladesh, and no rapist must live in Bangladesh, and no rapist of any extraction, of any connection with Bangladesh, must be allowed to think that they've got immunity, let alone impunity, from accountability. They must pay the price, and they must be made to pay the price so that justice is begun to be seen to be done for the victims of their crimes. That is very brief summary of the update on the situation in Bangladesh and in the subcontinent, and we shall be returning in due course to discussing further. Now, going back to the accountability, that is factual accountability and traceability and identifying of the evidence that we mentioned about the Financial Times talking about this one, the looming tax bills spur city, that is City of London, as a financial kind of location or platform. City of London banks to recall staff logging on at holiday villas. The City of London includes the City of London, the geographical part, and also the part called Canary Wharf and Docklands based in the borough of Tower Hamlets to the east. And they're saying about the Swiss bank, Credit Suisse or Swiss, has told employees they must return to the UK in order to meet tax and compliance requirements. According to people familiar with the company's actions, they're not talking about the details, they're just being oblique. And what we have as a campaign are world exclusive details about the behavior, unaccountable, undemocratic, criminally intended and operated behavior of Tower Hamlets, the so-called democratically elected council, and its colluders, collaborators, and cooperatives, not cooperatives. Now, this is going back to the period of, say, the month October. This is October 2020, and 10 years ago, the first election for a mayor, executive mayor in Tower Hamlets, was kind of perpetrated. Notice the word perpetrated. It wasn't something that we welcomed then, and it's not something we welcome now. And in fact, we welcome it even less than we could, in theory, tolerate 10 years ago. This campaign, the Khudilar campaign, opposed and opposes the position, the post of elected mayor, and we call it corrupting post, corrupt post, and the corrupt occupant of the corrupt post. So what we say today, we had said in kind of anticipation 10 years ago. We said in January 2010 that the elected mayor would bring disaster to the community in Tower Hamlets. We said that the community did not have any capacity in any recognizable, perceptible form to prevent the community of Tower Hamlets being exposed to aggravated disservice via that corrupt and corrupting post. Now, those who also supported the campaign against that plot claimed that they opposed this post because it was autocratic, it was dictatorial, and it was unaccountable. But as we have said in the past, all of them, except this campaign, Kudilar campaign, were found to have changed their position and become supporters of the post, the corrupting post and the corrupt post. Now, it is not necessary to name all of them who did the about turn and lied, because we call that lying. Because if the corrupting post was corrupt and unsuitable and unfit in January 2010, it could not have been changed by October 2010 because it's the same thing. So the thing that changed was the position of those who had pretended to be opposed to the corrupt and corrupting post, but later not only accepted the post and its launching, but also became its backers. Now, whoever they were matters less than what happened, because in October 2010, 10 months after the launching of the main opposition by this campaign and with some others who, as I have said, changed their position, within 10 months, a individual person was in post as the incumbent occupant of that corrupting post. Now that was October 2010, and this is October 12th, October 2020. That is exactly 10 years later. That election took place in the last week of October, so just 1 week short of 10 years. And that individual turned out to be Lutfur Rahman. And as the election commissioner, Richard Mori, has said in his ruling against Lutfur Rahman, published on the 23rd of April 2015, Lutfur Rahman was unfit for that post because of his behavior, including corrupt and dishonest means at the 2014, the second so-called election for the same corrupt post. Now, the evidence that Richard Mori saw must have been overwhelming evidence for him to say that Lutfur Rahman had behaved in a corrupt way. Now, we shall not read the whole thing, but we shall read some of it for the evidence, exactly for evidential reasons. And we shall let the viewers do the detailed kind of further searching, and they will find absolutely everything that Mori said in that ruling. There are altogether 12 items that are accessible immediately on the website Bailey, B-A-I-L-L, no, B-A-I-L-I-I.org. And this is the resource that is currently still available. The people who publish it have been asking for money because they need a lot of money to run this, and it is running short of money. But there are 12 items, separate items on the website that currently feature Lutfur as the name. And the one that we are looking at is the number 4, item number 4 on the list of 12. And it's headed before Commissioner Richard Maury QC. And the numbers of petitioners follows: Andrew Erlam, or Arlam, E-R-L-A-M, Debbie Simon, S-I-M-O-N-E, Azmal Hussein, H-U-S-S-E-I-N. And number 4 is Angela Moffat, M-O-F-F for Freddie A-T. And that is against Mohammed, M-O-H-A-M-M-E-D, Lutfur, L-U-T-F-U-R, Rahman. That's number 1. And number 2 is John S. Williams, returning officer. Now, in that ruling, the starting point that he makes in the introduction at number 1, paragraph 1, we shall read that one and then go to the other parts. 22nd May 2014 was election day throughout the United Kingdom. There was a nationwide election for members of the European Parliament. Many local authorities, that is councils, had council elections. And a few local authorities, that is councils, had mayoral elections. The London Borough of Tower Hamlets had all 3. While undoubtedly making practical sense to hold all the relevant elections on the same day, conducting 3 simultaneous polls necessarily presented considerable challenges for returning officers, both in ensuring that polling proceeded in an orderly and lawful manner and in arranging for 3 different sets of ballots to be correctly counted. In Tower Hamlets, there was a full council election with all 45 seats in 20 wards being contested. Between the 2014 election and its preceding election in 2010, there had been a whole-scale redrawing of the ward boundaries, and the number of wards had been increased from 17 to 20. In most of the wards, there were candidates from 6 main parties: Conservative, Liberal Democrat, Labour, the Green Party, UKIP, and a party local to the borough known as Tower Hamlets First. In the election of mayor, there were 10 candidates, and all the names are summarized in there. In paragraph 6, the Tower Hamlets mayoral election 214 turned out to be a 2-horse race, the principal candidates being Mr. John Biggs, the Labour Party candidate, and the outgoing mayor, Mr. Lutfur Rahman, the THF candidate. And on 7th paragraph, he says, at the count the following poll, the first preference votes for the 2 candidates were Rahman, 36,539, that is 43.38%, and Biggs, 27,643, that is 32.82%. And he goes on and gives the details of these votes and all the rest of it. And I'm going to read the bits that we started with. And I mean, he says the law, election codes and their procedures, election petitions, and that starts from 17, paragraph 17, 18, 19, 20. On paragraph 21, he says, a local election may be questioned by a petition under section 127 of the 1983 Act, which provides an election under the Local Government Act may be questioned on the ground that the person whose election is questioned, A, was at the time of the election disqualified or was not duly elected, or on the ground that the election was avoided by corrupt or illegal practices, or on the grounds provided by Section 164 or Section 165 below, and shall not be questioned on any of those grounds except by an election petition. And on paragraph 23, it says the ground that the election was avoided by a corrupt or illegal practices brings into play further sections of the 1983 Act. Section 159 bracket 1 provides if a candidate who has been elected is reported by an election court personally guilty or guilty by his agents of any corrupt or illegal practice, his election shall be void. So, what happened on the 23rd of April 2015? Richard Mori, the election commissioner, declared Lutfur Rahman's election to have been void. And he explains at paragraph 25, number 2, for the purpose of section 159 and 160 below, if it is reported that a corrupt practice other than treating or undue influence was committed with the knowledge and consent of a candidate, he shall be treated as having been reported personally guilty of that corrupt practice. If it is reported that an illegal practice was committed with the knowledge and consent of a candidate at a parliamentary election, he shall be treated as having been reported personally guilty of that illegal practice. The report shall also state whether any of the candidates has been guilty by his agents of any corrupt or illegal practice in reference to the election. But if a candidate is reported guilty by his agents of treating, undue influence, or any illegal practice, and the court further reports that the candidate has proved to the court there is no corrupt or illegal practice, or that the candidate and his election agent took all reasonable means for preventing the commission of corrupt and illegal practice, that the offense mentioned in the report were of a trivial, unimportant, and limited character, that in all other respects the election was free from any corrupt or illegal practice on the part of the candidate and of his agents. Then the candidate shall not be treated for the purpose of section 159 as having been reported guilty by his agents of the offense mentioned in the paragraph. These provisions are not entirely straightforward. Section 1581 is clear enough. And he goes on to explain the various implications. And he goes on discussing the law for quite a lot of the other paragraphs. And he lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 aspects of the element under corrupt and illegal practices. And the reason I'm reading all of this is going to be very clear in the details I'm going to add. The reason I have read this is because Lutfur Rahman was declared as having been elected under corrupt and illegal means. And he was declared unfit for public office for 5 years. Now, I'll not speculate as to what will happen at any next available opportunity time-wise involving Lutfur Rahman, because that is something that will involve speculation. So in the formal conclusion at paragraph 672, Mori says, the court is satisfied and certifies that in the election of the mayor, for the mayor of London Borough of Tower Hamlets, held on the 22nd of May 2014, the first respondent, Mr. Rahman, was guilty by his agents of corrupt practices, contrary to 1. Section 60 of the 1983 Act, 2. Section 62A of the 1983 Act. B. The first respondent, Mr. Rahman, was guilty by his agents of illegal practices, contrary to 1. Section 13D1 of the 1983 Act, and 2. Section 61(1)A of the 1983 Act. And C. The first respondent, Mr. Rahman, was personally guilty and guilty by his agents of an illegal practice contrary to Section 106 of the 1983 Act. And D. The first respondent, Mr. Rahman, was guilty by his agents of an illegal practice contrary to Section 111 of the 1983 Act. E. The first respondent, Mr. Rahman, was personally guilty and guilty by his agents of a corrupt practice, contrary to Section 113 of the 1983 Act. F. The first respondent, Mr. Rahman, was personally guilty and guilty by his agents of a corrupt practice, contrary to Section 115 of the 1983 Act. The court is also satisfied to the relevant standard of proof and certifies that the election for the mayor of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets held on 22 May 2014, A. There were corrupt and illegal practices for the purposes of promoting or procuring the election of the respondent, Mr. Rahman, at that election. And B. Those corrupt or illegal practices so extensively prevailed that they may reasonably be supposed to have affected the result of such election. The court therefore declares the election of Mr. Rahman as mayor of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets to have been avoided by such corrupt or illegal practices pursuant to Section 1591 of the 1983 Act, and also to have been avoided on the ground of general corruption pursuant to Section 1641A of the 1983 Act. It is declared at paragraph 675 that Mr. Rahman shall be incapable of being elected to fill the vacancy for the office of Mayor of London Borough of Tower Hamlets under Section 1641B of the 1983 Act. Number 676, Mr. Rahman is a solicitor of the senior courts, and the court is obliged by Section 162 of the 1983 Act to bring this judgment to the attention of his professional body, the Solicitors Regulation Authority. It is ordered that a copy of the judgment be sent to the Solicitors Regulation Authority. 677, the court will also report and certify that Mr. Alibor Chowdhury was guilty of a corrupt practice contrary to Section 113 of the 1983 Act and the illegal practices contrary to Sections 106 and 111 of the 1983 Act. As the court is required to consider the matter under Section 145(3) of the 1983 Act, the court finds that corrupt practices extensively prevailed at the election both of the mayor and of the councillors for the 20 wards of Tower Hamlets held on 22nd of May 2014. These conclusions will be embodied in the certificate of the court and will be the subject of the court's report to the High Court under sections 145, 158, 160 of the 1983 Act. Their effect is firstly that Mr. Rahman's election as mayor on 22nd of May 2014 was void. That is to say, it is as if it had never taken place. He has not lawfully been mayor since that date. Secondly, as has been said, Mr. Chaudhary must immediately vacate the office of councillor. Thirdly, it will be Mr. Williams' task to arrange for a new mayor election and for a by-election in the ward of Stepney. Now, this is a detailed reading from the report of 23rd of April 2015 in the name of issued by and stated by Richard Morey, a licensed law trader, also known as a QC, who sat as the election commissioner to hear the petition brought by Andrew Arlam, Azmal Hussain, Debbie Simon, and Angela Moffat. Why I have read this is absolutely clear in the following. During the period of campaigning against the corruption, regardless of this election, corruption that was ongoing and perpetrated by the Tower Hamlets Council as a whole, I took daily action to bring the facts to the attention of Alibor Chaudhary, who was given to me as the person that was to communicate with me on all these issues on behalf of Lutfur Rahman and pass on the facts to Lutfur Rahman. So I made regular contacts with Alibor Chaudhary by telephone and less kind of extensively by email. And Alibor Chaudhary promised to me every time, without any fail, that he was trusting the veracity of what I was saying and he was communicating all the facts to Lutfur Rahman every time. Anyone who watched this before, this channel, will know that I have said that we shall be discussing in detail the evidence of the council, Tower Hamlets Council and Newham Council in due course. This part is being done as part of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street on Monday, the 12th of October 2020, part C. And the reason I'm doing this is because there is nothing in the papers that remotely recognizes any of these goings on. By goings on, I mean the corruption, the illegality, the abuses that are perpetrated by the candidates and by their kind of forms or status when they get elected. So Mori says that Lutfur Rahman was not elected, should be treated as not having been elected on the 22nd of May 2014. Now 2014 and 2015, May and April, just under a year. So for about 11 months, Lutfur Rahman was in effect an imposter. He was not in that post lawfully, validly, and duly elected. Now this is more than 5 years since Mori published that. And the reason I have listed all of these is because in that 5 years plus, Lutfur Rahman has filed several applications against the Mori ruling, parts of the ruling, if not all of it, various parts and various kind of implications, especially about the money that he was ordered to pay to the petitioners, as well as the money that he owned properties and claim to the property and all the other things that have been involved as a consequence of the ruling, as implications. But essentially, Lutfur Rahman was not in lawfully elected post for 11 months, let's say. And he's saying, Mori is saying that those elections of the 20 wards for the councillors were also not properly done and improperly done, in effect, corruptly conducted. But because of technicalities, Mori did not include any kind of orders against those candidates as councillors staying on or not. He only ousted one councillor, Alibor Chaudhary, but he didn't do that based on those other irregularities. He did that for reasons of Alibor Chaudhary's association and action and role as Lutfur Rahman's associate and main kind of spokesperson, which is what I'm talking about. In the years, in the time since Lutfur Rahman got elected, so-called, and the word elected should be treated as within quotation marks. And the reason is that I don't recognize the post of mayor at all, even before Mori made a partial kind of finding. I reject the entirety of the mayor post, totally unacceptable and illegal and corrupt and corrupting. Remember, the word corruption is occurring in Mori's ruling. But my use of the word and concept of the term corrupt and corrupting cover wider behavior and conduct, and which is what I'm going to give the details here as update. Not everything I'm going to say is going to be new, but it's going to be contextually updating the previous versions and statements I have made about this. This is as important as it can be in terms of democracy, local democracy or central democracy, because Lutfur Rahman was bound to be the beneficiary. Lutfur Rahman, let's say, or any other person put as a candidate in his position, which he was in October 2010, was bound to benefit. Remember what I'm saying, Lutfur Rahman or anybody else who stood in that position was going to benefit illegally by taking advantage of the vacuum that existed in Tower Hamlets in October 2010 and still exists in Tower Hamlets in 2020. So what happened in between? In between that time, and especially between the day that he got elected or the week that he got elected, because I made first direct contact with him, Lutfur Rahman, on Friday the 29th of October 2010. And my contact with him is on film. I recorded him coming out of the Brick Lane Mosque after the Friday prayer on the 29th of October 2010, and wearing a broad smile, as broad as he could do, aimed at me. That is the camera. The camera records his broadest possible smile aimed at me. Obviously, I am not in the film. I'm filming him and his crew. Most of them are surrounding him and they are visible in the film. Why am I giving the details? Because absolutely unique, world exclusive. It's a caption analysis in the context, and it is absolutely world exclusive. Because the height of the hatred against Muslims, Lutfur Rahman by no means is known to have been a part of anything to do with the radical kind of form of alleged Islam. But because he is a Muslim, regardless of the level of his kind of or intensity of his dedication as a Muslim, it was absolutely clearly visible to me at all times that any Muslim who would get a platform as an elected mayor would be the target of attention that would not be related to anything else but their being just a Muslim, no matter how thin their Islamic kind of dedication or practices were. And this is what happened. This is one aspect, but I shall come to that later. Currently, I'm talking about Lutfur Rahman being found as being totally unfit to hold that post, regardless of what faith association he would have kind of hurled at him. And the reason I say that he was found unfit is to do with the behavior that was conveyed to me by Alibor Chaudhry, and the behavior that Lutfur Rahman kind of failed to live up to. And the behavior Lutfur Rahman then displayed, which completely violated every assurance that Alibor Chaudhry was giving me on behalf of Lutfur Rahman. For example, the behavior linked with Aman Dalbi. Aman Dalbi, A-M-A-N, Aman, Dalbi, D-A-L-V-I. Now, Dalbi is a kind of anglicized, distorted, perverted kind of form of Dahlavi. Dahlavi is derived from Delhi, D-E-L-H-I, but that is, Dahlavi is the Urdu origin kind of name. So Dalbi, Aman Dalbi is a distortion of the Urdu original Dahlavi. He is from Delhi. Aman Dalbi is a proven liar. Now, as a Bangladeshi origin person, I am supposed to be supporter or supportive of anyone who is claiming to be a victim of discrimination based on their ethnicity or their origin or their nationality or their faith or whatever. But I am not a practitioner of any of these. If on the evidence it is the case that the person making such a plea is a liar, and Aman Dalbi on the evidence is and has been a liar, I hope that anyone watching this can hear and understand clearly. And the reason why I am speaking in English is precisely so that there is no need for a translation. Because this is evidence. I'm submitting evidence and I'm sharing evidence. And I shall come to identifying Dalbi's lying and how Lutfur Rahman was lying as well. and how a whole line of liars were hired at public expense in the name of the people of Tower Hamlets to appear to be aiding Lutfur Rahman's work as an elected mayor. But neither he, Lutfur Rahman, nor these aides were helping the people of Tower Hamlets. Now, this is evidence. This is nothing to do with having any agenda to make a case that is not supported by the evidence. This is a case that should be applicable to the whole world, applied to the whole world, irrespective of faith or lack of faith in religious terms or ethnicity or anything else. It is universality. Anyone watching this must pause and think what words I'm using. Universality means that no discrimination, no preference based on faith or no faith, nationality or no nationality, gender or no gender, or any other orientation or any personal agenda. There is no personal agenda here. There never has been. So the idea of universality is because every human being is entitled to same level of treatment. That is the basic point. And in the year of the 75th anniversary of the foundation of the United Nations, it could not be more appropriate and topical. Now, Lutfur Rahman never deserved to be the number one citizen of Tower Hamlets, which is what officially he became in the official bureaucratic kind of listings because of the position that he was, quote, elected to. Who says that he was not? He said that. Lutfur Rahman said on the 20th of September 2012 that he was not fit to be the mayor. There was somebody else who was far more able and appropriate and entitled to be the mayor, assuming that they wanted to be the mayor. That is the assumption. And that person was me. Lutfur Rahman spoke to me in front of Alibor Chowdhury and another one in the basement of a restaurant called Marcos, situated at that time on the 20th of September 2012 in New Road, London, which is not very far from New Road, where I had my house for 20 plus years and my family had for far longer, which is where the Royal London Hospital did their attacks in 1987, which we shall come back to in due course. But this one is about Lutfur Rahman being found to have been unfit to stay in the post of mayor of Tower Hamlets, in the name of Tower Hamlets, as declared by the election court chair or commissioner, Richard Morey, the barrister Richard Morey, also known as Richard Morey, quote, QC, the licensed law trader. On the petition, election petition, submitted in the name of Andrew Arlam, Debbie Simon, Ajmal Hussain, and Angela Moffat. They submitted the application, the petition, within the required time in 2014. And Lutfur Rahman, when he said that I was the one who should have been the first mayor or the first MP, he meant the Bangladeshi background, but I think that I qualify regardless of my ethnicity, because as my work shows, I'm more, in terms of the skills that are associated with those post holders or seekers, I'm more able and capable than most of the MPs that are around, including Johnson. But the details of my abilities and skills will be listed appropriately as part of the evidence in due course, not in this part. Except to say that Lutfur Rahman said that to me, that I should have been the mayor, I should have been the MP. So that shows whether he said that to kind of please me or to appease me doesn't matter, because that is true. And it's not the first time that he would have said that. Why? Because all the statements that Alibor Chaudhry conveyed to me as being statements, paraphrased by Alibor Chaudhry, of course, statements that had been made to him by Lutfur Rahman about me, corroborated this every time. And by every time, I covered the period. October 2010 up to March 2013. So October 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. So just under 3 years, having continuous communications on a daily basis for just under 2 years is a long time, long volume of communications, long volume of evidence, long pattern of consistency. At no time did Alibor Chaudhry say that Lutfur Rahman had any other kind of view about me other than of highest respect. Now, this is Lutfur Rahman being represented to me by Alibor Chaudhry about what Lutfur Rahman thought about me. It's not daily contact with Lutfur Rahman directly, it's a daily contacts with Alibor Chaudhry about Lutfur Rahman's duties. And the duties that Lutfur Rahman failed to carry out and was under obligation to carry out was duties that related to the various crimes and criminal activities being done by the directly employed employees of the council and by the related agencies or groups. The main group in the context of this is the Spitalfields Small Business Association. We shall call it SSBA. And the Spitalfields Small Business Association was founded essentially at the beginning of the 1990s, although it was kind of in the offing late 1980s. But essentially it came into being in the first part of the 1990s, let's say. And it came into being as part of a two-fronted kind of service to the community. One was the Spitalfields Housing Co-op, and this was the Spitalfields Small Business Association. The reason why the Small Business Association was set up or had to be set up was a kind of device that is available in the kind of non-profit sector, cooperative sector like. And it was to help the Spitalfield Housing Co-op deal with the obstruction to getting money, income, etc. So the details of the SSBA's income generating kind of role we can leave until later, or until another version, another edition. But this one is going back to the connection. So it's a connection with Tower Hamlets Council, whose executive mayor was Lutfur Rahman at the time. So as the video, which can be seen on our online publications on Khudilar website and Twitter and Facebook, the video lasting less than a minute or about a minute dated the 15th of February 2011. In that video, which I had edited, filmed the whole thing, Lutfur Rahman is seen with Aman Dalby. And that was filmed between 164 Brick Lane and just past 170 Brick Lane. Now, I have mentioned the cat's house, the three cats' house or the kitten's house between 164 and 170 Brick Lane. This is where the kitten's house was, and the kittens were still at home in their house, which was behind 164 and 170 Brick Lane, just behind in the yard. There is a house which used to be a factory for many years. Now, all of these are absolutely central to the fitness of Lutfur Rahman as an individual, as a person, and as Maury says, he was a solicitor, senior solicitor at the time he was ousted. Because as a solicitor, Lutfur Rahman was expected, supposed to know the law and supposed to be loyal to the rule of law or the due process. Supposedly, the evidence that I had showed that Lutfur Rahman was not either aware of the legal process or he chose to ignore the legal duties. Whatever it was that motivated him, he never made a statement of confession either way. But the evidence that I have seen is abroad showed that Lutfur Rahman was lying. Why he was lying, who made him lie is secondary. The fact that he lied is evident in the fact that he did not do what he should have done to stop the criminality being carried out by the crooks and criminals. And the crooks and criminals include Aman Dalby. Aman Dalby is the one that is in that picture from the viewer's kind of angle. He is on the right, but from his angle, he is on the left. So there are three persons nearest to the camera, my camera. And those three persons, in the center is Lutfur Rahman. To his left, to the viewer's right, that is Aman Dalby. And to the left of the viewer and to the right of Lutfur Rahman is a person from the Spitalfield Small Business Association. In the far background, or far from the camera, farthest from the camera, are two faces. One is a man who no longer is alive, he's Askandar Ali, and the other one is Parvez Qureshi. Both of them were members of the executive or the management committee of the SSBA. In the case of Askandar Ali, he had been also involved as a member of the committee of the Spitalfield Housing Co-op, which by then, 2011, because the photograph and the film and the video was recorded and taken by me on Tuesday, the 15th of February 2011. So by that time, the Spitalfield Housing Co-op had changed into the Spitalfield Housing Association. Now, all these components and persons are integrally linked to the serial criminality perpetrated by Tower Hamlets Council and the SSBA. during the period July 2012 and October 2012. And the reason why this story and this account and this audit and this update, all of this is important because it continues to affect the immediate Tower Hamlets community, the immediate Brick Lane community, the immediate communities that exist based on the existence of the defense of the community in the East End of London. That is one level. And the other is the wider campaign that I have been involved in setting up for the whole world, not just for Brick Lane, not for just one part of the world, but the whole world, in addressing in a way that the United Nations for 75 years has not addressed, in addressing the world's hunger and the world's anger and the world's future existence, environment. All the work that I have been doing, I have been working every day. All the work I have been doing were made subject to the safety of the 3 kittens. The 3 kittens' safety became absolutely their number one priority at a time when these criminals mounted the attack on the kittens' home. And that is where we shall leave this particular description. We shall come to part D after about an hour from now.